Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Wednesday afternoon. We have some sneaky, but I think really important news for us to talk about related to this USC football program as we got a new head strength coach coming into USC. That's going to be Truman Carroll coming over from Kansas State. Now, we're going to get into Truman Carroll, but I want to start with number one, why is this important? Why did USC make the change? And then we'll get into, hey, is Truman Carroll a good hire for USC? I want to start with this. It was a little bit of a surprise when Lincoln Riley decided to part ways with Benny Wiley, who had been running the strength and conditioning program for Lincoln Riley going back to his time at Oklahoma and came over with him from Oklahoma to USC. I think we were all caught a little off guard when we saw this news later last week. But I think we knew when we saw the news that Lincoln Riley, Chad Bowden, this USC football program, they probably had a couple of names in mind. And I think Truman Carroll is certainly one of them. Now, I want to start with this. Why is this kind of hire so important? Very similar to how we talked about Chad Bowden a couple of months ago. When it's not a head coach, when it's not a coordinator, a lot of times these hires go under the radar according to the national media. When we talked about Chad Bowden getting hired by USC way back in the winter, we said, look, ain't many people talking about this right now. People are going to talk about this hire in a couple of months, and that's exactly what we've seen play out. Now, Truman Carroll, we're probably not going to be talking about this hire 12 months from now. This is a very important hire to get right for any football program across the country. And I think it starts with this. The at the foundation of this sport that we all love, and that is football. It is a height, weight, speed game. Do you have bigger, stronger, faster players than the teams that you are playing against? Now, it probably starts on the high school recruiting trail, getting those kind of bodies that you think have big time upside. The second part of that is developing those bodies so they can have success on Saturdays in the fall. That is the role for Truman Carroll coming in. Can we adequately develop these bodies so they can be the bigger, stronger, faster football players that we see on the football field Saturdays in the fall? Number two, you have historically seen these kind of hires have massive impacts on college football programs. Many of y'all know I'm a Michigan fan. Go back to the early 2020s. Jim Harbaugh consistently was losing to Ohio State, had a really bad season in that COVID year. Jim Harbaugh decided to make a change, and it was not a super. He made some changes with the coordinators and coaches, but one of the biggest changes that he made was hiring Ben Herbert as the strength and conditioning coach for Michigan. You ask Michigan players, you ask Michigan fans, you ask the Michigan coaches in that building as Michigan kind of got built up to where they were in 2023, winning that national championship, and said, hey, who were some of the names that really allowed Michigan to burst onto the scene and go win a national championship? There's going to be a lot of people that would point to Ben Herbert. Not only was Ben Herbert elite at developing athletic freaks for Michigan, he was also a massive asset on the recruiting trail. He's considered one of the best in the game. When these kids out of high school were taking visits to Michigan, they would go talk to Ben Herbert, and Ben Herbert would lay out a detailed plan regarding, hey, you come to Michigan, this is what your body is right now. This is what we're going to do to change your body so you can have success on Saturdays and go to the NFL. He was one of the biggest assets for Michigan on the recruiting trail, not even past just what we saw on the football field. These kind of hires, again, they don't get a ton of national media attention. This is not going to get a ton of national media attention. Has the potential to be a very important hire for Lincoln Riley in this USC football program. Now, I want to get into why did we see a change? What does Truman Carroll bring in, and kind of go about, hey, how do we evaluate? Is this a good hire? That's what a lot of USC fans have been putting in the comment section. We're going to get into that. Before we get into it, as always, to the USC fans, look, whether we're talking transfer portal, whether we're talking the recruiting trail, spring practice, y'all know any chance I get to talk some USC football, I'm doing so. The amount of support that y'all have shown to the boys has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, let's start with this question. Like, why the change for USC? I think why you saw USC made a change was, hey, we're changing how we're going about building our roster in terms of transfer portal, recruiting trail, what kind of bodies that we're bringing in. Chad Bowden has a certain vision for how he wants this USC roster to look. You've seen the changes in terms of what they're doing on the recruiting trail. Well, you probably want to make sure that the strength and conditioning department, the people involved and kind of tasked with developing these bodies, you probably want to make sure that the strength coaches are on the same page with Chad Bowden and Lincoln Riley. And maybe that just wasn't the case with Benny Wiley. And I'm not privy to what the goal is with Truman Carroll. Like, do they want a faster football team? Do they want a bigger football team? Do they want a more durable football team in terms of staying healthy on Saturdays? I'm not sure what led to the change being made and what the goal of the change was for. But I do get a sense that, hey, if we're going to be recruiting different kind of football players and trying to construct this roster a little bit differently, well, you probably want the strength coach to be on the same page and do things the way that Lincoln Riley and Chad Bowden envision this USC roster looking. We'll see what these kind of bodies look like coming out of summer workouts. I think we're all excited for those pictures. Now, is this a good hire? Like, this is the fascinating part, because this is a little bit more tricky to decipher. Hey, you go hire a coordinator, you go hire a head coach. I can give you some takes on if this is a good hire or not. Truman Carroll coming from Kansas State, a little bit more tricky to decipher. Here's what I'm going to use to evaluate if this is a good hire or not. Number one, what are the people around Kansas State saying about losing Truman Carroll? This is how I evaluate some transfer portal additions. This is how I evaluate position coaches as well. What are the people inside the Kansas State program? What are the fans saying that follow this program pretty closely? Go over some of the Kansas State message boards. I'll read you some of the stuff that I saw from the Kansas State fans. A lot of obscenities and frustration. Gigantic loss, brutal, terrible news, sets this program back. You can tell very quickly that the Kansas State fan base and the people within the Kansas State program really did value what Truman Carroll has done for Kansas State over the last couple of years. Then the second thing to look at, and this is probably the most important in terms of, as an outsider looking into Kansas State and trying to evaluate the job that Truman Carroll has done, what are you doing with the talent that comes into the door? At Kansas State, I'm going to read you the last 4 years since Truman Carroll took over at Kansas State. This is what they've done on the recruiting trail: 57th in the country, 62nd in the country, 41st in the country. Shout out Avery Johnson. 58th in the country. They've historically recruited outside of the top 50 pretty dang consistently in Manhattan, Kansas. But now I'm going to read you the records of those 4 years: 8-5, 10-4, 9-4, 9-4. Each of those years at a time, Kansas State was considered a top 25 team in the country in the AP poll. So you're telling me we got a team that consistently recruits outside of the top 50 in terms of talent acquisition, but is consistently considered a top 25 team in the country? That's probably the best way to evaluate what Truman Carroll has done at Kansas State. He's taking guys that he doesn't have that as much talent. I shouldn't say that much. He doesn't have as much talent coming in through the doors as some of these other top programs across the country, but has consistently gone toe to toe at Kansas State with some of the better programs across the country. Now, is that all Truman Carroll's doing? No, absolutely not. But he's a large part of what Kansas State has done over the last couple of years. Then the second thing, hey, how many NFL draft picks are you developing? 3 years. The last 3 years for Kansas State, 10 NFL draft picks. Pretty dang good number considering you only have 1 or 2 blue chip recruits coming into your program every single year. So we're doing a good job developing NFL talent. Here's probably the stat that I like the most. Every year Truman Carroll's been at Kansas State the last 4 years, he's had a guy that's gone over 1,200 yards rushing the football. This Kansas State team ran the football very well under Truman Carroll. What does that tell you about developing those big uglies on the offensive line? Like, we are a big physical team that can run the football on anybody in the country. Kansas State's been doing something right. And you give a ton of credit to Coach Kleiman, who is a phenomenal head football coach for Kansas State. but you also have to give a lot of credit to the support staff and everybody in that building. And Truman Carroll is one of the more impactful people in that building. That he's one of these kind of hires are some of the more impactful coaching hires that you can make. Who do you think these players spend the most time with? I think we said this later last week. It's not the head coach. It's not the coordinators. It's not even the position coaches. Like the football players spend the most time with the strength and conditioning coaches in the weight room. It's nonstop. They see these guys every single day. You talk about developing culture. You talk about having a team that the team that you want it to look like. These kind of coaches have a really big impact on what this team looks like on Saturday. It's hard to evaluate if it's a good or not hire, but I think Kansas State's done a lot with not a ton of talent coming into Manhattan, Kansas. I think USC fans should be fired up. Going to be really fun to see. We always get it, like those body transformations. I, I think where I'll close out. I got one more take, and I promise you I'll shut up. USC is looking for alignment, top to bottom. That starts with the president, goes to the athletic director, goes to the head coach, goes to the general manager, goes to the coaching staffs, goes to the guys in the weight room. They've done a very good job. You can tell the head coach, the football coaches, the administration, the front office, Chad Bowden, and the general manager unit, they're all pulling in the same direction. That's what has made USC so electric on the recruiting trail. You want to make sure, even going down to the guys in the weight room, we're all pulling in the right direction. We are working towards the same goal and vision of this USC program. That's why I think you made the change. That's why you have Truman Carroll. Is he going to be a good hire? We about to find out over the next couple of years, but I think the USC fans should be excited. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.